What if Halloween night turned into a nightmare? Imagine a group of friends excited to trick or treat, only to find themselves drawn to a house that seems straight out of a horror movie. What dark secrets lie behind its door? As a harmless prank spirals into terror and a mysterious figure begins to stalk them, they realize that not every Halloween is just for fun. Join us as we dive into these disturbing true Halloween horror stories, where eerie encounters and chilling choices blur the line between fright and reality. But before we delve into tonight's terrifying tales, a huge shout out to all of you. Your support fuels this channel and keeps the nightmares coming. If our eerie stories captivate you, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a chilling episode. And if you want to help us grow and keep the fear alive, share our videos, drop a comment, or explore our support options on Patreon or Ko-fi. Every bit of support helps us bring you the best spine-tingling content. Thank you for joining us on this dark journey. Now let's embrace the shadows together. It was Halloween night a few years ago, and I decided to take a walk around my neighborhood. The streets were buzzing with laughter, children running from house to house in costumes that ranged from adorable to terrifying. As the night wore on, the vibrant atmosphere began to shift. The laughter faded, and an eerie stillness enveloped the air. Feeling restless, I took a familiar path through a small wooded area that bordered the back of our neighborhood. I loved this shortcut. It was usually peaceful and away from the chaos of trick-or-treating. But that night felt different. The air was thick, almost electric, and a shiver crawled down my spine. I tried to brush it off, telling myself it was just the chilly October air, and kept walking. As I reached a clearing, I noticed an old, run-down house that I'd never seen before. It loomed at the edge of the woods, its windows boarded up, and the paint was peeling like it hadn't seen a fresh coat in decades. Curiosity gnawed at me. What was this house doing here? It felt as if it had emerged from the shadows just for this night. I crept closer, my heart pounding in my chest. The air grew colder, and a faint whisper seemed to weave through the trees, urging me to turn back. But I pressed on. The door was slightly ajar, creaking as I pushed it open, revealing a dark, musty interior. Cobwebs clung to every surface, and the smell of decay filled my nostrils. My instincts screamed to leave, but something was pulling me in. I stepped inside, the floorboards groaning under my weight. Shadows danced in the dim light filtering through the boarded windows. My heart raced with a mix of fear and excitement as I caught sight of a staircase spiraling up into darkness. Ignoring the instinct to flee, I began to climb. Each step echoed in the silence, heightening my senses. At the top of the stairs, I found a narrow hallway lined with closed doors. They seemed to loom over me, heavy with secrets. One door at the end stood slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness beckoning me closer. I took a deep breath, heart pounding, and pushed it open. The room inside was empty except for an old, dusty mirror hanging on the wall. As I stepped closer, I felt a chill wash over me. The mirror's surface was clouded, but it still reflected the room around me. I gazed into it, my reflection staring back. Just as I was about to turn away, I caught a glimpse of something moving behind me. I whipped around, but the room was empty. I let out a nervous laugh, trying to shake off the unease. But when I turned back to the mirror, my heart dropped. There, in the reflection, was a shadowy figure standing right behind me. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. It was tall and featureless, just a dark silhouette. I wanted to scream, to run, but my body felt paralyzed. The figure seemed to reach out, its hand inches from my shoulder. I could feel a cold breeze wash over me, sending shivers down my spine. Then, just as quickly as it appeared, the figure vanished, leaving only my wide-eyed reflection staring back at me. Panic surged through me and I stumbled back, desperate to escape. I bolted down the stairs, adrenaline propelling me forward. I didn't stop until I was outside, gasping for breath in the cold night air. The familiar sounds of Halloween returned, but I felt a heavy weight on my chest. I turned to look back at the house, but it seemed to shimmer in the moonlight, as if it were fading away. I could almost convince myself that I'd imagined the whole thing, but deep down, I knew I hadn't. The lingering sensation of that figure stayed with me, like a shadow I couldn't shake off. Over the next few days, I tried to forget what happened. I told myself it was just a trick of the mind, a Halloween scare that got out of hand. But every time Halloween approached, a knot formed in my stomach. The memories haunted me, and I avoided that part of the neighborhood altogether. Then, one year, I gathered the courage to ask my friends about the house. They all looked at me oddly and admitted they had heard stories about it. Apparently, it had been abandoned for decades, and there were whispers of strange occurrences, disappearances, flickering lights at night, and sightings of a shadowy figure. It was as if the town had collectively chosen to forget. I never went back to that place. Halloween now feels different to me, filled with a sense of dread that lingers long after the costumes are packed away and the candy is eaten. Every year I remind myself that some doors are best left closed and some houses are best left alone. I'm not sure how to start, and I apologize if it sounds disjointed. The story I'm about to share happened a couple of Halloweens ago. I usually don't like talking about it, but my friend Emma insists it might help to get it off my chest. We had been invited to a college party at a mansion in the affluent part of town. The place was enormous, featuring a sprawling backyard and a beautiful pool. The theme was seductive, so Emma dressed as a sultry nurse, while I opted for a belly dancer costume. There were around 60 to 70 people, but the size of the house made it feel spacious rather than crowded. I'm not a heavy drinker, but I had some fruit punch since everyone was encouraging me to have fun. At one point, a group of partygoers asked us to take pictures, so I set my drink down and joined in. We snapped photos for what felt like forever, and when I returned to grab my drink, I took a sip without considering how long it had been sitting there. That's when a guy I didn't recognize approached me. He appeared to be in his late 20s or early 30s and mentioned my boyfriend Tom, saying he had been trying to reach me. It hit me then that I didn't have my phone. I felt guilty because I had promised to check in with Tom since he was working that night. The guy seemed genuinely concerned and insisted it was urgent. He offered me his phone to call Tom from one of the upstairs rooms. Without thinking twice, I followed him, convinced that if Tom really needed me, it had to be important. However, as soon as I stepped into the room, an unsettling feeling washed over me. He quietly closed the door behind us, and I felt a strange heaviness in the air. I was already feeling dizzy, so I sat down on the bed. He handed me his phone, but my fingers felt numb and uncoordinated. It was as if the room was closing in on me. He helped me lie back, and before I knew it, everything went dark. I don't know how long I was out, but when I finally came to, I had no idea where I was or what had happened. Emma was leaning over me, anxiously wiping something off my stomach with a napkin. She looked panicked, muttering under her breath. It took me a moment to understand the situation, but then the realization hit me hard. I was still in the bedroom, lying on a bed, and Emma was trying to clean me up. That's when panic set in. I felt queasy as I processed what this could mean. Emma rushed to calm me, insisting that nothing too serious had happened. She explained that she had lost track of me during the party. After searching for a while, she thought I had gone to the bathroom or stepped outside for some air. When I didn't come back, she started to worry and checked the rooms, only to find me passed out on the bed with that guy. Emma told me he had been bent over me, his mouth near my belly button. He was using my unconscious state for some sort of twisted drinking game, taking shots off me, sucking alcohol from my belly button, licking salt off my chest, and kissing me. The thought made my stomach churn. I was shaking, tears filling my eyes, feeling completely upset. How could I have let this happen? Just as I began to spiral into despair, Emma reassured me that she had already called Tom. He had finished his shift early and was on his way to pick me up. She tried asking around about the guy, but no one recognized him or remembered seeing him at the party. He was just a ghost who had slipped in unnoticed. When Tom arrived, I could barely meet his gaze. He was furious, but tried to keep his composure for my sake. He and Emma helped me out of the house and drove me straight to urgent care. I wanted nothing more than to escape that place and forget the whole night. At the clinic, they ran some tests. Thankfully, the substance that had knocked me out didn't seem to cause any lasting damage, but the feeling of vulnerability lingered long after. I wish I could say that was the end of it, but a few days later, I started receiving texts from an unknown number. At first, the messages were innocuous, things like, "How's your day?" or "Did you miss me?" I ignored them, assuming it was just a prank or spam. But then I received a photo of my own stomach. My heart sank as I realized he had taken the picture at the party in that very bedroom. The messages quickly shifted from vague comments to outright threats, saying he was watching me and that he knew where I lived. I felt trapped. I tried blocking the number, but he always found a way to reach me. I thought about going to the police, but without any real evidence beyond the texts, I hesitated. I didn't want to draw more attention to myself. I even considered luring him out somehow, trying to set a trap, but I didn't know how dangerous he might be or if he would even show up. Months have passed, and the messages still come occasionally. Each time I feel that familiar chill run down my spine, wondering if he's lurking outside my window or watching from a distance. Not knowing who he is or what he's capable of is the worst part of all. Halloween is my favorite holiday. I love dressing up without fear of judgment and celebrating with others who share my excitement. There's a party I attend every year at a friend's house, starting at sunset and going well into the next morning. This year was no exception. I donned my trusty black cape and a red waistcoat, coordinating with my girlfriend Mia, who wore a lovely black dress with a red corset. We made sure our fangs were gleaming for the night, ready to impress the trick-or-treaters. When we arrived at the party, it was already dark. Familiar faces surrounded us, ghouls, goblins, and all sorts of creatures mingled, enjoying snacks provided by our generous werewolf host. However, there was one unfamiliar figure, a disheveled young man standing alone in a corner, watching everyone else with a look of disdain. His costume was minimal, a white t-shirt stained with fake blood and a black trench coat, giving him an unkempt appearance. I usually loved reconnecting with friends, but this stranger piqued my curiosity. New faces were rare at our gathering, and he seemed to carry a heavy vibe. While Mia caught up with some friends dressed as witches, I decided to approach the stranger. "Hey there," I said, with a friendly smile. "How are you enjoying the party?" "It's terrible," he replied instantly, "just like everything else in this messed up world." "Hey, that's okay," I said, flashing my sharp fangs. He didn't laugh. Instead, he turned his attention to a group of girls dancing to Monster Mash. "Look at them," he sneered. showing off their bodies just to tease guys like us. They'll never give someone like me a chance. In that moment, I realized I was talking to someone filled with bitterness, an incel, as people might call it. You really don't hold back, do you? I said. Why should I? He shot back. Why care about their feelings when women like them never cared about mine? I felt a mix of frustration and pity. You know, you sound a bit misguided, right? Nothing matters anyway. Just then, a police car drove by, its sirens flashing red and blue. A voice echoed through the neighborhood, warning residents to stay indoors due to an active shooter. For the first time, a smile broke across his face. I noticed he had kept his hands hidden in his trench coat the whole time. You're starting to figure it out, aren't you? He said, a chilling gleam in his eye. Just then, Mia returned, and I saw the stranger's expression darken. She was beautiful, and I could tell she embodied everything he resented. Hey, who's your new friend? Before she could finish, he pulled out a revolver from his coat and fired at her. The bullet struck her forehead, and she fell backward. The young man laughed maniacally. You're all finished. I'll show you what happens when you look down on someone like me. But to his shock, Mia stood up, brushing off a small scratch that healed instantly. Not so easy, she said, smiling. He turned his gun toward me, firing off several shots that hit my chest. I felt the impact, but didn't even budge. Really? I said, half joking. That was my favorite shirt. Laughter erupted around us, easing the tension. How did you? He stammered, but I grabbed his wrist and squeezed. The sound of cracking bone filled the air, and the gun clattered to the floor. He cried out in pain, eyes wide with fear. You'd have better luck taking me down with a pencil, I told him, watching as his bravado faded. Bringing a gun to a party full of creatures like us? What were you thinking? Laughter filled the room, and the mood shifted back to celebration. As he tried to flee, I swiftly struck him, and he fell to his knees, gasping. He attempted to crawl toward the door, but our werewolf host stepped in, immobilizing him with a well-placed kick. Whether he was begging or crying out for help was hard to tell. Regardless, we all ate well that Halloween night. This story happened to my brother, and I'm sharing it from his perspective. Back in October 2019, he went trick-or-treating with a few friends, whom I'll call Alex, Ryan, and Mike. They were around 13 or 14 years old and figured this might be one of their last chances to enjoy Halloween like this, especially with high school looming ahead. Excited for the night, they donned their costumes and hit the streets, eager for candy and the thrill of the season. As they wandered down a quiet street around 9:30 p.m., they came across a house that looked like it was straight out of a horror movie. The yard was completely decked out with fog machines, glowing skeletons that seemed to dance in the mist, and even a fake graveyard complete with tombstones that had eerily realistic inscriptions. It must have cost a fortune to set up, and the atmosphere was so intense that it sent shivers down their spines. Curiosity got the better of them, and they approached the front porch, adrenaline pumping as they rang the doorbell. To their surprise, a man in his mid-50s answered the door. He had an unsettling demeanor, but managed a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "No need to be loud, just come in for your treats," he said, his voice low and inviting. Ryan, always the cautious one, stepped forward but hesitated. "Can't you just bring the candy out here?" he asked, trying to gauge the situation. The man didn't respond, he just stood there, his expression blank and his eyes piercing. Feeling uneasy, the boys exchanged nervous glances, and without another word, they turned around and walked away. However, just as they made it halfway down the street, Mike suddenly stopped and whispered, "Guys, I think that guy's following us." They turned around, and sure enough, The man was trailing about 30 feet behind them, moving at a leisurely pace, almost as if he were enjoying the chase. Panic surged through them. Without a word, they bolted down the block, hearts racing and legs pumping. The man didn't even run, he just strolled after them, his intentions unclear, but definitely sinister. They reached my brother's house, flung the door open, and locked it tight, their breaths coming in rapid gasps as they huddled together in the living room, trembling as if they'd just run a marathon. Just as they were trying to regain their composure, Luke whispered urgently, "Dude, look out the window." My brother's stomach dropped at the sight. The man was right there, staring through one of the windows, his expression unchanging. With their parents out of town for the weekend and his older brother at a party, they were utterly alone, without anyone to call for help. The worst part? My brother noticed that the man had a small handgun gripped tightly in his hand, and a chill ran down his spine. Panic set in even deeper, and they rushed upstairs, huddling together in my brother's bedroom, the walls suddenly feeling like they were closing in. Jason fumbled for his phone, fingers trembling as he dialed 911. It felt like an eternity as they waited, hearts pounding with fear, but the police finally arrived about 15 minutes later. By then, the man had vanished from the yard, leaving an eerie silence in his wake. The officers checked the house, and after what felt like forever, they brought the man out in handcuffs. To their horror, it turned out the house was abandoned, and the guy wasn't just some creep. He had escaped from a mental institution 2 weeks earlier. The realization sent shivers down their spines. What scared them the most was the thought of what could have happened if they had actually gone inside when he invited them. The boys all vowed that night never to go near that street again, even when they were older. Who knows what might have occurred if they hadn't run when they did? My brother still shudders to think about it. He's grateful they were old enough to sense something was off, and didn't brush it off as just another Halloween prank. So, if you ever find yourself trick-or-treating and get a strange vibe from a house, just leave. No amount of candy is worth putting yourself in danger. Trust your instincts and get out of there if something doesn't feel right. The thrill of Halloween should never come at the cost of your safety. If you've encountered a terrifying event or have a spine-chilling horror story to share, we at Eerie Shadows want to hear from you. Share your experiences with us and let's uncover the mysteries lurking in the eerie shadows together. Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel for more eerie tales and spine-chilling stories like this one.